Hey, welcome NASCAR fans to this week's edition of our On Pit Row Race Rewind. This time for the Geico 500 at Talladega Motor Speedway Talladega Super Speedway this past Sunday. Exciting race, the final race of the contender round of the chase to the NASCAR Sprint Cup Championship. This was the one that set everybody up for the Eliminator round. Of course, big names got eliminated and for the Eliminator round, and we're going to talk about it a little bit. I'm Charlie Turner. He's Dan Beaver down in Texas. How you doing, Dan?
I'm doing great. It's starting to get fall here, and it's just it's one of those great times to be in this part of the country.
Yeah, I bet it is. It's definitely turning to fall up here. In fact, the room I'm sitting in, I'm freezing my tail off, but whatever. That's about me. So, what did you think of this race? I mean, there was a lot of drama. I mean, a lot of it created by NASCAR's new chase formula. Of course, we had some big name drivers that were on the bubble, and really four big name drivers failed to exceed the bubble, I guess would be one way to put it. But one guy did. Brad Keselowski won the race, had to win the race to advance in this year's championship. That could be the race that takes him to the Sprint Cup.
Good. And you broke up a little bit there, so hopefully you can still hear me.
Yeah, I hear you fine.
Okay. Yeah, I lost the last part of your sentence there, but I know the best thing that I can ever say about Talladega and Daytona is it's over. So, I mean,
well, what I said was, it was we had big names that were on the bubble for making the chase, and four big names did not. Jimmy Johnson, Dale Earnhardt Jr., Casey Kane, Kyle Busch. And there was drama involved in really probably all those guys for at least part of the race. Looks like they might all make it through the cutoff, but none of them did. Brad Keselowski made it, won the race, had to win the race probably to advance, and he did. And that might be this. I mean, this could be the key race for his whole season. I mean, he could win. He is a legitimate contender to win this Cup thing, but if he didn't get into this, he didn't win this race, he wasn't going anywhere.
The only surprise in all of that was Kyle Busch getting knocked out.
Yeah, that was an extreme surprise.
It was a coin flip as to whether or not I always believed, or I thought, that one of the three drivers was going to advance. One of the three marquee drivers is going to advance, either Keselowski, Johnson, or Earnhardt. And last week at Roto World, I predicted it'd be Keselowski, and the other two would get eliminated this week. So that ended up being correct, but it was a guess. You can't predict anything at Talladega. You can only guess as to what's going to happen there. The fact, if Keselowski had missed it, I think that I think that it would have invalidated the chase. You've got the four best drivers that should be in at least this round. Maybe something happens in this round that knocks them out, but Harvick, Gordon, Logano, Keselowski, those have been the class of the field pretty much all season, definitely during the last part of the regular season and during the chase. And if Keselowski had missed the chase, then it was going to call into question a lot of things. Most notably, Talladega being in the as a elimination race, or being in this level of the chase. Now, Talladega didn't end up being the one that changed everything. It was Charlotte and Kansas that put everybody so far back. But I fully believe that everybody was expecting Talladega to be such a wild card that they took risks they wouldn't have in those other two tracks, and that set up this. Once we got to Talladega, I'm not sure. I don't find this style of racing particularly interesting. I don't find it particularly dramatic. I think it's all artificial, and they developed some storylines in there. But it wasn't surprising that Johnson missed. It wasn't surprising that Earnhardt missed. The only surprise was that Kyle Busch didn't make it. And to some extent, I think Keselowski winning when he had to was a bit of a surprise.
It was interesting at the beginning of the race because we did have all of those, other than Kyle Busch, all those drivers were players early in this race. Jimmy Johnson led a bunch of laps. Dale Earnhardt Jr. led 20 some laps. They looked like they would be in contention. And I mean, I watched Johnson and Earnhardt dicing with each other in the first 50 laps of that race, like it was the last 50 laps. I'm thinking, man, if this is like this all day, this is maybe, one of the great races of all time. It didn't work out that way, but it was interesting. I do think it's another topic to talk about, whether this Talladega belongs at this point in the chase. I don't know how they tweaked that exactly. I think they need to do something, but at least the race was. I thought it was interesting. I mean, I'm not a fan of restrictor plate racing, as you are not either. But you cannot deny the excitement of those cars running, side by side, passing each other constantly for the lead. It's just you just shake your head thinking, wow. Wow.
I disagree there. Like I said, I really don't find, and part of it is what I do for my day job, having to handicap races, maybe. But I really don't find it to be particularly interesting or particularly exciting. It's all artificial, it's all manufactured, and it's not what I think of as racing. So,
well, it isn't what I think of as racing either, and I agree that it is artificial. But watching it on the screen, those are still cars that are going 190 to 200 miles an hour, running four wide, passing each other all the time, which we don't get much of the year during the season. So I do. There is a. It's like watching a horror movie, a slasher movie. I don't really think those are great movies, but sometimes you can't help but getting, shocked.
I think it's like watching the freeway cam on one of the LA freeways.
Yeah.
So, and that's about as far as I would go with it. But that's my opinion, and that's a great thing about NASCAR is it allows for all sorts of different styles of racing, and allows for different people to be engaged in different ways. And there's no doubt that this is a fan favorite race. It's just absolutely not my favorite. And not just because of its unpredictability. Like I said, I don't like watching it. So I just you and I are just different on that. But like I said, I just soon watch the LA.
I'd rather watch a road course race, okay? But we don't get very many of those. One of the things we talked about before we went live with this hangout was the qualifying deal. You want to touch on that a little bit, because I did not see it, and I know you didn't like it much.
Yeah, not one of NASCAR's shining moments. They had the problem at Talladega this spring and Daytona, where the drivers just didn't want to go out there. They go out there and run slow, so they thought they would make this heavily complicated, convoluted new rule change to break them into smaller packs and shorten the time, so they had to go out there, and they got the exact same thing. In fact, a little bit worse, because there were fewer minutes to try to do the bit of strategy that they were doing. And with Logano, Harvick, Gordon, several of these other top-ranked drivers getting knocked out or not getting a real time, we have a driver who had a perfect record of top 15s at Talladega go home. Now, he went home because he was low in the points, Ricky Stenhouse Jr., but that was just absolutely ludicrous. And there's such an easy answer out there that NASCAR seemingly will not avail themselves to, and that would be to have heat races or just draw for a lineup at Talladega among the top 36 teams and give provisionals and whatever you want to do to field the field. What they've got right now for the qualification procedure just did not work, and it was humorous.
Yeah, it doesn't make much sense. Let me run down the top 10 real quick while we talk about this. Brad Keselowski, of course, won the race. He led 12 laps, but he led the most important one, the last one. Matt Kenseth was second. Clint Bowyer third. Landon Castle, fourth place, finished up one of those Talladega restrictor plate rise. The scum rises to the top. Sorry, Landon, I don't mean scum, but I couldn't think of another better word. Ryan Newman fifth with an illegal car, as it turns out. Travis Quaffle in sixth. Kurt Busch seventh. Marcus Ambrose eighth. on maybe his last ever restrictor plate race. Kevin Harvick 9th and Casey Mears 10th. So there's 4 or 5 drivers in there that you wouldn't normally see in the top 10 at any race, making it because they were at Talladega. How big a deal do you think this Ryan Newman penalty is? I mean, it's not going to affect anything other than he's probably going to get tapped in the pocketbook. And but should it? I mean, that's my question.
Well,
if he drove an illegal car and he got into the chase, should that stand?
Well, and the announcement was made before we went on air. No penalty. NASCAR deemed that the infraction or that the car was lowered because of crash damage.
Oh, okay.
Not sure if that's true or not. That's not really where he got hit. It didn't seem. But had they given him a penalty, and most people assumed it would be like a 25-point penalty, and that would have still put him above Casey Kane.
Yeah, he was still going to make it. But had it been somebody who just squeaked over and there had been a penalty, what should it be?
I think it should be consistent with whatever NASCAR deems to be the appropriate penalty for that infraction. And if a driver knows that they are going to get out of that event with enough of a cushion, then they potentially are playing in the gray area of the rules, and that's part of the big tradition that is NASCAR. So I didn't have a problem with it, and NASCAR didn't have a problem with it either. And like I said, they said that there was no penalty whatsoever, right. No infraction, in fact, because it was caused by crash damage. So it doesn't take away from what Ryan Newman did leading up to this, and honestly, it's as good a way to get a finish at Talladega as anything else.
You're right. Okay. Any other comments as we leave Talladega in the rearview mirror for the rest of the 2014 season?
Yeah. And thank goodness. There were a couple of other good storylines in there. Matt Kenseth pushing Brad Keselowski to victory lane after pushing him between shoving him last week, I think was definitely one of those things that it's amazing the regularity, how frequent that stuff happens in NASCAR. That was an excellent story. Landon Castle, that was not only his first top 5, it's his first top 10. And his career best finish before this came in the spring race with an 11th. So Castle definitely deserved the result that he got and deserves the attention.
Yep.
And Travis Quapple's 6th place finish, that's only the second time he's been in Joe Falk's car. So I think that was pretty notable that he could jump in a car that he's only been in once before, doesn't know the team very well, and still could get to the top 10. Those are stories.
That's the former Ryan Blaney car, right? That Blaney got dropped from 2 weeks ago.
No, that was that was Ryan Truex, but this is Joe Fox car that has had David Strimmy and a couple of other guys in it throughout the season. For the most part, Quapple's been in Frank Stoddard's number 32, and then he picked up the BK ride because of his previous association with them. But this was a brand new, almost a brand new pairing, and they did that well. So those are the kinds of stories that I think Talladega makes interesting, and Daytona makes interesting. So if you're rooting for the story, you get a lot of them here at Talladega. If to put a silver lining on what I think of as a dark cloud. But
all right,
those are that I saw coming out of this.
All right, well, that's the last. We won't come back to Talladega until sometime in I think April next year. So we have a lot of time NASCAR will have a lot of time to tweak whatever they're going to tweak, if they're going to tweak anything. And maybe we won't come back to Talladega at this point in the chase next year either, if enough of the noise gets heard. We'll see how that works out. Again, he's Dan Beaver. You can follow Dan on Twitter at Fantasy Race. Read his terrific fantasy racing articles at yahoosports.com and rotoworld.com, and read us on Pit Road Magazine, where this hangout will be this week as well. So new magazine just came out. Dale Earnhardt Jr. is on the cover. Article there about the big one, which we didn't talk about that. It really wasn't a big one at this Talladega race, which is kind of unusual. And that's pretty much it. All right. Any final thoughts, Dan? Anything?
No, except Kyle Busch might disagree about the big one.
Yeah, well, I kind of that's like a little big one. I mean, what they
Yeah.
weren't we didn't have multiple, we didn't have over 10 cars involved, so it was a big wreck for him, but not a big wreck as big wrecks go at Talladega and Daytona. So anyway, that's it. We'll be back next week to recap the big race at Martinsville Speedway this weekend. Another one of those, I don't know, I guess you call it wild card races because lots of things can happen there, but it'll be a little more to talk about as far as racing goes, I think, next week. So we'll be back next Tuesday to talk about Martinsville. Thanks for joining us. Enjoy the racing this weekend.